Hello, everyone. I am Kay Chamberlain, and welcome to another episode of Midlife Crisis, the show on the Marvel and DC Retrospective podcast, where I go through every single DC event, or like most of them, in release order, talk about them, explain what happens in them, and just do a retrospective on every single event. Today, we're going to be starting Armageddon 2001. Now, Armageddon 2001 was an event released in 1991, and it was the beginning of an initiative that DC would do over the next couple of years, where they would have an event every year that was that would incorporate all of the annuals for all of the series, and you would have to read all of the annuals to get the whole story. They would all connect together, so it wasn't really any tie-ins. It was more so like the annuals were the story, and if you didn't read them, you wouldn't know what happens. And so they started with Armageddon 2001, and that's what we're going to be starting to read today. And so I'm going to be starting with issue 1 of Armageddon. There's only 2 issues of Armageddon, and then we got all the annuals in between, but we're starting with Armageddon issue 1, written by Archie Goodwin, with art by Dan Jurgens and Dick Giordano. And so let's get straight to it. The issue begins with this person who's later going to be revealed to be a guy called Matthew Ryder, basically just talking about how, because he lives in the year 2030, and in his time, they are ruled by this guy called Monarch. And basically, the beginning of the issue explains how Monarch comes to be, where back in the year 2001, all of the heroes were betrayed by one of their own, and they were all killed by one of their own, and then that person became Monarch. So, one of the superheroes became an evil villain, and now rules the year 2030. So Ryder wants to find out who it is, and hopefully, use time travel to go back in time, find the person who is Monarch, and stop them. So his friend Harris actually tells him that Monarch is trying to figure out time travel, which confuses Matthew, and Matthew would eventually find out that the reason Monarch is trying to perfect time travel is because he's actually haunted by the past, and he wants to send somebody back in time to fix the past and stop his nightmares. Stop his nightmares from haunting him, stop the past from haunting him. Because, Monarch doesn't really know exactly where he came from, because he's the present version of himself. Or at least he does. So Monarch obviously remembers his past, but it's a secret to whoever this is a secret to the reader. And Monarch just wants the hauntings to stop. So he's hoping that he can still be in control in the future while no longer being haunted by his past. And that's what he plans on doing, is trying to figure out time travel. So Ryder heads to this place where there's this old man who has memory discs of Earth's history, and this kind of shit is actually outlawed in the year 2030 because it's history related to Monarch, and Monarch doesn't want anybody to know the truth. So Matthew Ryder goes there to get some information on Earth superheroes so he can learn more about them. Eventually his wife comes in and is like, you gotta stop being on the computer. It's dinner time. You gotta spend time with your family. And the thing about Matthew's family is that they're pretty dysfunctional. His daughter works for Monarch. She's a member of a crew called the Peacemakers, who I wouldn't be surprised are named after the character of the same name. It's the future development of Peacemaker becomes this core, They work for Monarch, and so they enforce the rules, and Ryder Matthew hates Monarch, and so he hates the fact that his daughter works for Monarch, and she's just like, Dad, you're just gonna get used to it. if you don't like me working for Monarch, then just take it up to him. You know, go talk to Monarch about it. And this really pisses Matthew off because all he wants is for his family to be safe, and he knows that they're never going to be safe under Monarch's rule because Monarch is known for having temper tantrums and destroying entire cities and trains and anything whenever he gets upset. And so he's got these statues that planted all over the earth, and the eyes of the statues beam to him, and Monarch has like a base orbiting Earth, and the statues allow him to see what's going on Earth. He has like energy powers, and that's how he destroys cities and stuff. He just shoots like large amounts of energy. So Harris reveals to Matthew that Monarch is trying to figure out time travel, and while they're talking, the Peacemaker crew come because apparently they're running after a terrorist that's about to get on a train, and they're like shooting at this terrorist, or they're planning to shoot at this terrorist, and there's a little girl in the way, and Matthew's just like, get out of my way, like, you're about to injure a little girl, you know, and so he runs in to help this little girl, and the Peacemakers get upset that Matthew is getting in the way. He saves the little girl, but he doesn't, like, the old man that they're shooting at, who is apparently a terrorist, doesn't make it. He gets shot and died. And it's revealed that this guy is the guy that Matthew was buying the information discs from. Matthew gets taken in by his daughter, Karen. And she's like, what the fuck are you doing, Dad? And Matthew's just like, I'm doing, like, what I should do, which is saving a little girl's life. And she's like, and he's like, you were gonna let her get shot? And Karen's just like, I was doing my job, and if somebody gets in the way and somebody has to get hurt because of that, like, that's what happens. You know, as long as we take down this terrorist. And when she reveals that the terrorist is the old man, Matthew is really pissed off because he was like, he was just an old man. Like, how is he a terrorist? She's just like, don't ask me, like, but why did he run, you know, when we came after him? As far as I know, he's the bad guy. And so that's kind of the last straw for Matthew. He decides that he really needs to do something about this. So he decides that he's going to go back in time. He's going to be the one that goes back in time and tries to change things by finding the hero who becomes Monarch and stopping them from becoming Monarch. So he goes to take part in the time travel experiment that Monarch is doing. People have tried it in the past. They get, like, the whole idea is that you get sent into time to become what is known as a rider, but the people that have been sent in have never come out, and you have to be the right person for it. And Monarch decides to give Matthew a chance because he senses that Matthew's passion for his family might be the key behind, you know, being a rider, a successful rider. So, Matthew goes and taunts a statue of Monarch and blows it up as an act of terrorism. And so the Peacemakers come to get him, but this time Monarch shows up and he's like, give him to me. You know, I'll handle this. And so he takes Matthew to his orbital station and basically that's when he reveals to Matthew that he's being haunted by the past, and he wants Matthew to go into the past and try and fix it so that he's not haunted anymore. So he straps Matthew up to a machine that's going to test whether or not he's right for the job, and it basically forces Matthew to fight a simulated version of Monarch, and if he wins, he gets to be a part of the experiment, and if he loses, he dies. And his passion for his family is enough to push him through the simulation, and he beats the simulated version of Monarch, and so Monarch decides that he's ready to go to be a rider. So Matthew gets hooked up to the time machine, and he gets sent through time, and it transforms him into what he calls a wave rider on the time stream flow. So he transforms into a character called Wave Rider, who's like this shiny gold dude with fiery hair and rainbows coming out of him. And he flies through the flow of time and eventually arrives in the year 2001. And there he kind of shows the reader what his powers are, which is he can touch someone and see their entire life experiences up until that moment. So he gets attacked by a mugger, and he touches the mugger and sees all of the events up to the mugger attacking him, and is basically like, I'm gonna go and find every hero, and I'm gonna touch them, see their history, and see if they're the one that becomes Monarch. And so that's Matthew's goal, and we're left off in this issue with Matthew beginning his journey to finding who the Monarch is. And we'll find out where Matthew's journey takes him next in Superman Annual 3, which will be the next chapter of Armageddon 2001. I will say, pretty strong start. It's very hard to sell a DC comic, especially for an event, without any of the actual heroes really appearing in it at all. They appear in flashbacks and like summarizations by Matthew, but they don't say anything and stuff. But I think I'm already drawn in. Like I enjoyed this quite a bit, so I'm ready. I'm ready for this event. It's gonna be good. Alright, so next up we're going to be talking about Superman Annual 3, written by Dan Jurgens, with art by Dusty Abel. So this annual starts off with Superman trying to stop the Intergang from escaping Stryker's Island, which he succeeds in doing because he's Superman. So he sweeps in, he stops them all, but then they stupidly reveal that they have a ship in the skies that's, getting away. So Superman goes after the Intergang ship and stops them, and then heads off to the Daily Planet to see Lois Lane. Meanwhile, Wave Rider is traveling through time, talking about the fact that, because Monarch in the past was a hero that had destroyed all of the other heroes and was apparently a hero who was righteous and good, his deduction is that it's most likely Superman, because who else could defeat everyone? And he hates the idea that Superman could be Monarch, but he has to be sure. So he goes to the Daily Planet where he sees Lois Lane, and because he's in time, he's able to make it so that people can't perceive him. So he's able to watch Lois Lane meet with Superman, and neither of them can see him. And so he touches Superman in order to see Superman's future, to see if he becomes Monarch or not. In Superman's future, Superman marries Lois Lane, and then Intergang creates a nuclear bomb and blows up all of Metropolis, and kills Lois, Jimmy, Perry. The only person in Superman's life that survives are Lana Lang and Mark Kent. Those are the only people that survive in his life. And so Clark ends up marrying Lana, but it's not just to replace Lois, and it's not out of love. It's just out of the feeling that he needs to replace her. So their love is pretty toxic. He's nice to her and stuff. It's just not a healthy relationship. And because of the nuclear bomb blowing up Metropolis, Clark becomes a different kind of Superman now, where basically his goal is to take out all nuclear weapons no matter what. He doesn't kill people and stuff. He still tries to prevent casualties, but his goal is to stop all nuclear weapons. And so he goes after a submarine and takes it down. He shoots it with his laser, with his heat vision, and he saves everyone in the submarine, and then scans the submarine with his X-ray vision, sees that no one else is in there, and lets the submarine sink to the bottom of the ocean. But the president says that, because the president's been pissed off that Superman has been stopping all of the nuclear weapons and stuff, it's getting on his nerves now, because he wants nuclear weapons for protection, and he's discovered that Superman's last, rendezvous with that submarine ended in the loss of several people. Several people died in that submarine. And so now he finally has something to use against Superman. But as they're discussing, taking Superman to court or, possibly hanging him for murder, Superman shows up and is just like, hey, Mr. President, first of all, I know nobody died because I scanned the submarine with my X-ray vision. Second of all, you better stop making nuclear weapons right now. I'll be watching. And then he leaves, and the president is just like, we need somebody to stop Superman for us. And I know just the guy. So, he goes to Gotham City in order to talk to Batman and ask Batman to stop Superman. At this point in time, in the future, Commissioner Gordon is now Mayor Gordon. Tim Drake is still Robin. He's just a lot older now. He's probably like 30 or something. And Batman is a lot older now. It's still Bruce Wayne. You'd think it would be like Dick Grayson at this point in time, but it's not. It's still Bruce. He's just got like gray sideburns. So the president comes and asks Batman to fight, like to take down Superman. And Batman's like, I don't believe you. Like, I don't believe he did kill anyone, you know, and I'm not going to go and kill my friend, you know. And in this future, Batman and, like, later on it's revealed that Batman and Superman know each other's identities, so that they know that they're Bruce Wayne and Clark Kent, so they're very close to one another, even closer than they normally are. And Batman basically says, like, I'm going to go investigate this submarine. If you're right, then I'll go after Superman, but if I prove you wrong, then you got to drop this whole thing. And so Batman decides to head off to investigate the submarine by first going and talking to Clark. So he heads to the Kent farm, where it's revealed that Ma Kent has Alzheimer's and still believes that Clark is a high schooler. It's really sad. He thinks that he's with like, he's still got a crush on Lana, even though he's married to Lana. It's quite depressing. And then Bruce shows up and is basically like, hey Clark, the president told me that you killed a bunch of people in a submarine. Is that true? And Clark is like, no, I used my X-ray vision to check the submarine, and I made sure everyone was out alive. And Clark's like, and Bruce is like, I believe you. I really do. Like, I'm sorry. But you've got to stop doing this, like, obsession with nuclear weapons. Like, he tries to convince Clark to slow down with this whole nuclear weapon thing and just stop doing it because he's getting himself in danger. But Clark refuses, and he heads out as Superman in order to continue doing his job at, like, what he believes is his job. Bruce decides to send Tim to go investigate, and Tim he finds a file that confirms that Superman did cause casualties on the submarine. So Bruce has the hard decision of sending the Justice League to go and stop Superman. So he sends Booster Gold, Martian Manhunter, and Fire to all confront Superman, and Superman refuses to stop, and so they're forced to fight him. He takes out Booster Gold pretty quickly by using his heat vision on his flight ring, and then fights Martian Manhunter and Fire. He uses, like, some sprinklers to put to cause fire to, or, like, he throws a pipe at her. Sorry, I thought it was sprinklers. No, he throws a pipe at her and knocks her to the ground, and then gets attacked by Martian Manhunter. But Fire and Booster Gold shoot Martian Manhunter, which causes him to fall out of the sky into the fire that Fire had created from her own body. Like, because she created a fire when she got hit by the pipe. She fell on the ground and created a big fire. Martian Manhunter falls in the fire, and he fucking dies. He gets a heart attack from the fear, because he's got a massive fear of fire because his wife was tortured and burned alive, and that's left him, like, mentally hurt by fire, and he was so overwhelmed that he got a heart attack and he died. A military plane comes and tries to take down Superman. Superman says, like, you know, the Justice League are there, so they can help Martian Manhunter. I can take care of the military, you know, they'll take care of him. And then Superman discovers that Martian Manhunter is dead, and Booster Gold's like, it's all your fault. He had a heart attack. And Superman's just like, oh, he had a heart attack? Well, then it definitely wasn't my fault. And he just doesn't care, and he leaves. It's pretty messed up. But, like, he knows that the military are going to be after him, and he needs to get his family to safety. So he heads back to the Kent farm. He grabs Mark Kent and Lana Lang and takes them to the Arctic. Batman decides that Superman has gone too far. You know, he's caused the death of Martian Manhunter. He needs to stop Superman himself. And so he goes to his safe and he grabs a kryptonite ring that he got from Lex Luthor. He also adorns an armor that looks almost exactly like the armor that he wore in The Dark Knight Returns when he fights Superman. It's a bit of a throwback to that. And then he calls Clark, who is in the Arctic with his family, and tells him to meet him so that they can talk. And Superman says, like, you know, Batman's my closest friend. He deserves to talk to Superman. Also, at this point, Clark has started to talk about Superman as if he is a different person, and that he and Clark are not the same person anymore. So he's like, yeah, like, Batman's friends with Superman, so, like, Superman will go talk to him. So Superman goes and visits Batman. Batman's like, I've got to stop you, Clark. Like, you've gone too far. And so I've got this kryptonite ring, and I'm gonna, like, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to kill you. And Superman obviously doesn't like the idea of dying, and so he fights Batman and manages to get him to drop his kryptonite ring. And then Tim Drake shows up with the kryptonite ring in order to try and kill Superman and save Batman. But Superman uses his super breath on Tim Drake and smacks him into a wall, which breaks all of Tim Drake's bones, which really pisses off Batman. And he's like, you didn't even check to see, like, if you shattered his bones or not when you sent him crashing into that wall. And Superman's like, I'm always careful, Batman. Like, there's no way I hurt him. And Batman's just like, you've changed. You're too dangerous now. Like, I'm sorry, my old friend, but, like, this is how it has to end. And Bruce kills Superman with the kryptonite ring. And Superman, as he dies, says, I'm sorry I had to, like, please keep Lana safe. And Bruce is just like, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry, friend. I'm sorry it had to happen this way. And Bruce is just like, it never should have come to this. And Wave Rider decides that, obviously, because Superman dies at this point, he can't become Monarch. And because Batman was the one who killed Superman in the future, and is still alive at that point in time, the next person he's going to go and visit is Batman, so he can discover if Batman is the one who becomes Monarch. And so Wave Rider heads off to Gotham City to go find Batman, and we'll find out how that turns out in Batman Annual 15. Alright, so the next issue that we're going to be covering is Batman Annual 15, the last Batman story, written by Alan Grant with art by Jim Fern and Steve Leialoha. So this one starts off the same way that the Superman one does, where Wave Rider finds Batman, but instead of actually going and looking for Batman, he decides that the best way to find Batman is to have Batman come to him. So he pretends to be a dude that's being mugged in an alleyway, and so Batman comes to save him, and he does, and then when he goes to reach for Wave Rider's hand, because he's, you know, disguised, who doesn't know he's Wave Rider grabs Batman's hand, and then we get to see Batman's future in 10 years to see whether or not he is going to become the Monarch. So, in this alternate future, the Joker has been announced sane by 3 doctors, so he's been let out of Arkham, and he is going to start his own talk show called Joke's on You. Tim Drake has given up being Robin because all of Batman's villains, except for Killer Croc, Catwoman, Penguin, and Joker, are all currently dead, and that they've all been killed by Batman, according to the police and stuff. So Tim Drake stops being a vigilante because he can't handle it anymore, and he wants to handle law in a different way. So Tim decides to run for senator. Meanwhile, Batman goes after the Penguin, who's stealing diamonds, and when confronting the Penguin accidentally slips, and Batman, the Penguin slips because Batman hit, him with his Batarang, and he falls over a balcony, And Batman's just like, no, grab my hand! But it's too late. The Penguin goes splat on the ground and dies. And Penguin's just like, don't help me! I'll call help! You know, because he's actually afraid of the Batman. And upon his death, this kind of pushes Batman even further. And he's like, oh my god, I killed the Penguin! Meanwhile, Killer Croc is a wrestler at the moment. A famous wrestler. He's no longer a criminal. He's just a wrestler on TV. And after having killed the Penguin, Batman turns himself in for execution. So he's locked away in a cell to await to be put in an electric chair. And Commissioner Gordon visits him, and Batman's like, you know, I don't want you to do anything to try and get me out of here. Like, I deserve this. I deserve to die. You know, it's my fault. And so he and Gordon have a really heart-to-heart moment, and they have a hug, and Gordon's just like, my friend is about to be executed. Like, this is just a terrible day. There's no way I can feel happy about this. Meanwhile, the Joker, having been appointed as sane, visits with the doctors who said he was sane, and then decides to treat them to a visit to Dan and Art. What happens is that these doctors are actually killed off screen by Dan and Art. We'll find out who Dan and Art are later, but the Joker isn't actually sane. He's still insane. He just got these doctors to, you know, pronounce him as sane so that he could get his own talk show and humiliate people live on television. So Catwoman, Selina Kyle, is investigating the deaths of all these villains to figure out who was behind it. So she goes and attacks a bunch of muggers and gets one of them to speak and says that, like, he doesn't know who was responsible for Penguin's death, but he knows that Killer Croc will know, so that she should go and visit Killer Croc because he'll know who did it. So that's what Catwoman does. She heads off to find Killer Croc. Meanwhile, Tim Drake arrives to talk to Batman. You know, he's going to become the senator. His campaign's going really well, and Batman just tells Tim to, like, leave him alone and, like, not try to break him out, because Tim is talking about breaking Batman out because he doesn't deserve to be in prison, and Batman's like, no, don't. I deserve to be in here. And Tim's just like, Batman told me to never put the costume on again, but I think I'm going to have to defy his wishes and put my Robin costume on again. Unbeknownst to Tim, a mysterious figure is watching Batman from a distance, planning to spring Batman from prison. Batman also gets a phone call from the Joker because the Joker wants him to appear on his talk show, which Batman agrees to. Unbeknownst to the Joker kind of gives away a little bit of a hint as to, like, how the Penguin actually died to Batman, so Batman's getting a little bit suspicious of the Joker. We get to see a little bit of how Joker's live show goes, so it's just a show where he brings on guests to humiliate them, and in order to prove that he's sane, he uses laughing gas on his audience, but it doesn't kill them anymore, and instead it actually wears off. And then he brings on his first guest, and while his guest is talking about this invention that he's created, he drops him in a giant toilet and humiliates him. And that's basically how the Joker's show kind of goes. It's pretty bizarre. Pretty great. Tim heads back to Wayne Manor, where it's revealed that Alfred is a lot older, and he has his own robot to help do his job. And he reluctantly agrees to allow Tim to go into the Batcave to grab his Robin suit, because Tim is going to try and spring Batman from prison. Meanwhile, Anarchy shows up at the prison to try and spring Batman, Lonnie Markin, because he believes that, you know, Batman deserves to be free, and so he wants to spring Batman, and Batman refuses to go with him, and Anarchy just, you know, goes with his wishes and is like, okay, if you don't want to be sprung, I won't spring you. Catwoman confronts Killer Croc and has a big fight with him. Normally, Killer Croc would be able to beat Catwoman, but because he's been softened up and he's no longer a street fighter and he's just a wrestler, Catwoman is actually able to beat Killer Croc and get the information out of him. And Killer Croc reveals to Catwoman that it was the Joker who was responsible for Penguin's death, and that it was a massive setup for Batman to make the police think that Batman has been killing all of his foes. Tim Drake shows up at the prison to spring Batman, where he comes across Anarchy and realizes that Anarchy got there first. He fights Anarchy, but the police show up, and he's like, damn, I gotta get out of here. And so the police start shooting at Tim until the Joker arrives in his helicopter, because he's come to talk to Batman. So they take him into the prison cell where he can talk to Batman, because he basically just wants to humiliate Batman on live television and, reveal to Batman that it was him the whole time, and that he was the one responsible for, Bruce, for Batman ending up being executed. And he also wants to reveal Batman's identity on live television, so he pulls his mask off, but it turns out that it's not Bruce in the prison cell, it's Anarchy, and that the Anarchy that, it's Lonnie Markin. And so the Anarchy that Tim Drake came across was actually Bruce wearing the Anarchy costume. Bruce decides that he needs to go to Joker's tower, and the Joker realizes that Bruce and Robin are going to the tower, which is where they'll find the evidence against the Joker. So the Joker decides he needs to go there and stop them before, they discover the evidence against him. Catwoman has already made it to the Joker's tower, and when she gets there, she's attacked by Dan and Art, who turn out to be mutated baboons that work for the Joker. So they fight Catwoman, and they critically injure her, and they're about to, maul her to death, and then Batman and Robin show up and beat the crap out of them in an attempt to save Catwoman. They beat them, but Catwoman sadly suffers to her wounds, and Batman kisses her, and she passes away. It's really sad, and Batman's just like, that's it! I'm gonna kill the Joker! Or at least, this is it, this is the final battle with the Joker, I am determined to take him down once and for all. The Joker shows up in his helicopter. Batman uses his grapple hook, a grapple gun, on the helicopter to cause it to crash into a nearby building. So Batman and Robin head into the building and find a computer, which Tim deduces probably has the information, the evidence against Joker on it. So while he hacks into the computer looking for evidence, Batman goes and confronts the Joker for the last time, where Joker reveals what his whole plan was, which was basically to kill the Penguin and get away with it, because the Penguin was the one that set up with him up with the doctors to make it look like he was sane, because basically the Joker was the dream is to be sane and be allowed to do whatever I want in public, which is create a show where I humiliate people. But then I started missing the fact that I wasn't able to humiliate you, Batman. And so, the Penguin started blackmailing me, and I decided that I would, kill off all of your villains so that they would all think that it was you. That way, when I killed the Penguin, they would think it was you as well. But you just happened to show up on the night that I killed the Penguin, and so it ended up working out perfectly for me anyway. And then the Joker's like, and now I'm gonna kill you. And he tries to hit Batman with this, stretching rod, and the rod hits an electrical socket instead, and electrocutes the Joker to death. And Tim shows up and finds Batman over the Joker's body, and he's like, it's over, it's finally over, the Joker's dead. And Batman starts laughing maniacally, and that's when the, flash forward to the future ends. Batman realizes that he's just been in this trance and he's seen his own future, and he sees Wave Rider, and he's like, what the heck was that? What happened? And Wave Rider explains everything to Batman. He explains that he looked into Batman's future to see if he would turn out to be Monarch, and Batman's like, well, am I? Do I turn out to be Monarch? And Wave Rider's like, no. The only people that fear you have a reason to, but your city sees you as a hero, and so there's no way that you're like gonna end up being Monarch. And so he leaves to search for the next hero that he's going to, decide whether or not they're Monarch, see their future, and Batman heads off to continue his war against protecting Gotham. Or for protecting Gotham. And that's where the annual ends. Alright, so now we're going to talk about Justice League of America Annual 5. This one is quite a long one. There's a lot to get through because the Wave Rider decides to look at the futures of every single member of the Justice League of America, and we see all of them. It's written by Keith Giffen and J.M. DeMatteis, with art by Steve Carr and Jose Marzan Jr. from The Flash. This is definitely some of like Keith Giffen's and J.M. DeMatteis' weaker work. I just think that this one is like, it kind of drags. It definitely suffers from being an event tie-in. But it's still fun. Like, some of them are pretty fun. So Wave Rider goes to the JLA headquarters, where he meets the Martian Manhunter and decides Manhunter will be the first one that he contacts with. So he touches Manhunter, and we get to see Martian Manhunter's future. Martian Manhunter would eventually become this being known as the Green Guru, who people go to visit in order to ask any questions they want for the answers. So this guy who has given up his entire life to find the Green Guru finds him and asks him what the meaning to life is, and the Green Guru responds that life is like an Oreo cookie. And the dude's like, what? I gave up my family, I gave up my son, I gave up everything, and you're telling me that life is like an Oreo cookie? Something that my son could have told me himself? Like, I'm gonna get my lawyer and I'm gonna sue you. And he leaves, and Green Guru is just like, maybe not. And that's it. Like, that's Martian Manhunter's future. And then by the way, Wave Rider is pretending to be Captain Atom so that he can talk to all of the members of the JLA. Forgot to mention that. He disguises himself as Captain Atom. He contacts Guy Gardner next, and we get to see Guy's future. And in his future, Guy has created a cult of Guy where everyone worships him. He's about to go on stage and talk to his cult of Guy, but he gets bonked on the head, which, as we know, switches his personality, and he becomes really nice. And when he goes on stage to talk to his cult, they all turn against him, beat the crap out of him, and he gets thrown out of the seminar. And that's Guy's future. We get to see a little bit more of Guy, but as for now, that is as much as we see. So the next person that Wave Rider contacts with is Blue Beetle, and we learn that Ted Kord's future is shit. He starts doing, he signed a contract with Booster Gold to sell their, brands. That fell through, and then Ted Kord ended up being forced to do advertisements for bug spray, and then he ended up just getting, really fat and depressed, and missing the old days of being a superhero. And that's Ted Kord's future. It's pretty messed up. And so Wave Rider moves on to Ice. I forgot to mention that Maxwell Lord has recently been shot in the JLA comics, and so he's in hospital in critical condition. So yeah, that's a thing. And so all the JLA members are talking about how they're really sad that Maxwell Lord might not pull it through. Might not pull through. So, Wave Rider contacts with Ice next, and we learn that Ice has become a cat lady. She's got a lot of cats, and she sees that Guy has been beaten up by his own cult on the news after he got his head bonked. So she knows that his personality has switched, so he needs her right now. So she heads to a spot that she knows Guy always goes to, and sees Guy, and Guy just talks about the fact that, he's just confused, and that, he knows that he's acting different, and that he knows that he will eventually, go back to being how he was before, and Ice tells him that, she just doesn't care, and that she loves him, and he reveals to her that, he loves her, and, they decide that at that moment, Ice and Guy Gardner finally get together officially. because they both love each other for who they are. It's a very heartwarming moment. And we actually get a little bit more straight after that when Wave Rider contacts with Fire. We learn about Fire's future. And it turns out that Guy and Ice get married because Fire and Oberon go to their wedding. And it also turns out that Oberon and Fire are together, and Oberon proposes to Fire, and they get engaged. In the future, Fire is a model, and she also has her own company, and she's the one who who made the contract for Blue Beetle, for Ted Kord, that eventually ruined his life because it fell through. So because of that, Ted busts through the doors of the church and tries to kill Fire because his life has hit rock bottom, and he ends up getting thrown in prison because Fire sends him there. And so it's pretty fucked up. The future of the Justice League of America is pretty damn bleak. So Wave Rider contacts with Booster Gold next, and it turns out that Booster, after the contract with Blue Beetle fell through, he decided to head back to the future so that he could get his equipment, get more equipment and start over as Booster Gold again, or another superhero. But this time when he tried to do it, he got caught by the police, put in prison for 2 years, put on probation for 6 years, and now he's a janitor at the museum. So his life sucks. He's just a janitor now. And he is in the museum and he sees a museum piece for Blue Beetle where he discovers that Ted Kord's life turns to shit. And because Blue Beetle is his best friend, he wants to go back in time and fix Ted's life. But the only one who is available at the time that could help him fix Ted's life is Maxwell Lord. And apparently at that point in the future, in the year 2001, Maxwell Lord is a beachcomber. So Booster decides to head back in time to find Maxwell Lord and help save Ted. So that's what he does. Wave Rider contacts with Miracle Man and discovers that Miracle Man in the future will have his own group called the Miracle Squad, who basically just perform miracles, escape arts and stuff like that. He also has a family with Big Barda now. They have 3 kids, and he discovers what's happened to Ted, and he wants to help Ted by helping him, by springing him from prison and then talking to Fire so that she drops the charges. And Big Barda's just that's a stupid idea. I'll go talk to Fire. You guys wait here. Do not try and break Ted out of prison. And so Oberon and Miracle Man are just left to stay out of Big Barda's way because she's going to go talk to Fire. And they're okay, alright, you go do your thing. So that's what happens in their future. Next person that Wave Rider contacts with is Captain Glory, or General Glory, who is basically like a Shazam meets Captain America, where he's all about America, but he is actually just a regular dude who says a specific line, and then he becomes Captain Glory. So in his future, he's just an old man in hospital. He doesn't want to be General Glory anymore, but in this future, Maxwell Lord comes to visit him and wants him to help them start the JLA again, because he believes that, America needs the Justice League and one can't survive without the other. Eventually, he pushes Glory so hard that he agrees. His real name is Joe. And so he says his catchphrase, which is, "Lady of Liberty, hear my plea, for the land of the brave and the home of the free." And he transforms into General Glory and goes to a meeting that Maxwell has held, where he announces to the, to the United Nations that the Justice League of America are coming back. And they all cheer, and the Justice League of America is created. Again, they're all reunited, all of the members, Ted Kord, Booster Gold, Ice, Fire, everyone, Guy Gardner. They all have their first meeting in a long time, and it turns out that in the future, they all have the same haircut as Guy, but it's not Guy Gardner's haircut. He thinks they got his hair, their hair cut like him, but it turns out they've all just got Ernie haircuts because apparently General Glory wanted that because he's a big fan of the Three Stooges. And yeah, that's that future. It's a weird ass future for the Justice League where they all have Guy Gardner's bowl cuts. So Wave Rider's contacted with everyone in the Justice League, and he's come to the conclusion that none of them are Monarch. But then he remembers that there's one person he hasn't contacted with. Maxwell. So he heads to the hospital to find Lord, where he finds him in a hospital bed, and he contacts with him, and we get to see Maxwell Lord as a beachcomber, and then a mysterious object crashes from the sky, and it's Booster Gold in a time machine. He arrives in the past in order to get Maxwell's help with helping Ted. So he agrees. They head over to Fire's office, where Maxwell has a talk with her and manages to take stakes in her company, which allows him to help, Ted get scot-free. He basically says, I'll help you with your company if you drop your charges with Ted. And she agrees because Maxwell Lord is a great businessman. But things go real south for Wave Rider because by contacting with Maxwell, he actually causes Maxwell's body to go even more unstable, and Maxwell is near death now because of Wave Rider, and Wave Rider's just oh no, I didn't know, I had no idea that would happen, shit. And he decides that he has to go and find the next hero so that he can find Monarch, and he feels real bad that he could have possibly caused the death of Maxwell, and that he's made things worse. And that's where the annual ends. And so the next annual that we'll be covering is Hawk and Dove Annual 2, which is where the story will continue. So we'll find out what happens next in Hawk and Dove Annual 2. Alright, so now we're going to be reading Hawk and Dove Annual 2. Written by Barbara Kessel with art by Kurt Swan, Gabriel Morissette, Kerry Gamil, Paris Collins, John Statham, Charles Barnett III, Bob Lois. A lot of artists on this because different people did different parts of it. So Wave Rider decides to go after Hank Hall next to see his future because Hank Hall, aka Hawk, is known to be quite a hothead. And because Monarch is a bit of a hothead and a bit brutal, it means that it's very likely that Hawk could grow up to be, could eventually become Monarch. So he contacts with Hank, and we find out that in the future, Hank Hall is a member of the Peacemakers, and but he's against them, and he doesn't really want to work with them anymore because he started to see them as Nazis because he's realized that Monarch sucks, and so because he's, becoming insubordinate, they take him aside, and he gets a little bit too rowdy, and they shoot him. And so Hank dies, but right before he dies, Hank has abilities to turn into Hawk. I don't know when they changed that, but, I think it's always been a thing where, he says Hawk, and he transforms into Hawk, who is technically another person. And so when Hank dies, he transforms into Hawk, and now he's just going to be Hawk forever. And he decides that he's going to go and kill Monarch. Because, he's had enough of Monarch's rule. Monarch killed all of his friends. Monarch killed... or Monarch at least thinks that he's killed Dove. We will later find out that Dove is still alive. And so Hawk tries to get Monarch's attention by breaking his statue, and it works. And so Monarch shows up and is well, I guess I'm going to have to kill you because you're really fucking annoying me. And so Hawk and Monarch meet each other, and Hawk reveals that he can transform into a giant monster. So he transforms into this giant Hawk monster, and then he and Monarch fight each other, but Monarch is incredibly powerful and pretty quickly overwhelms Hawk. Hawk holds his own for a bit, but Monarch is just too powerful, and he ends up beating Hawk, but Hawk manages to get away just quickly enough. He gets sapped into another dimension. The one who sapped him in there was Dove, It doesn't reveal that it's Dove right away, but it is Dove. And that's where Hawk's future ends for now, is that he ends up in this other dimension, and he and Dove decide that they're going to work together in order to defeat Monarch once and for all in the future. Dove finds Hawk in his little trance, and manages to pull him out of it. So Wave Rider decides that he's going to contact with Dove and see her future, because Monarch is wearing a suit, so you can't tell what gender is in that suit. So he's like, it could very well be a woman. So he contacts with Dove, but Dove somehow in the future can sense Wave Rider in the time stream, so she kind of like pushes against him when he tries to see her future. He eventually succeeds in, pushing through and seeing her future, but it turns out the reason she can do this is because in the future she's become like a god-level being. She's a member of this group called the Circle, who looks over the entire universe, and she realizes that her Earth is in trouble because of Monarch. But then Dove eventually starts pushing against Wave Rider again and turns his abilities on him, so she gets to see Wave Rider's future. And so Wave Rider has to like get out of contact with Dove and get away because he can't control his powers around her. So he loses contact with her and then is grabbed by the future version of, like, he sees the hand of the future version of Dove and touches her hand. So so current Dove's powers manage to negate Wave Rider's powers, but then Wave Rider sees future Dove, who still exists and is like omniscient, and she reaches for him and he grabs her hand, and then we get to see future Dove in the future, if that makes sense. I'm trying to make as much sense of this as I can. So future Dove reveals that her Hawk is dead at this point in time. This is like far future Dove, like long after Hawk is already dead. She also has a son, like a child. It's really weird. Her child transforms multiple times. They don't really explain why, but like this kid is like omniscient. And so she greets her child, and then we get a look into, another part of Dove's future, because we're looking at like different points in time in Dove's future, and we get to see the future of her reuniting with Hank, and then they decide to go and fight Monarch one last time, which is the time that they die. So her and Hank are like, we're going to go fight Monarch as Hawk and Dove for the last time, and it's when they die. And so Wave Rider decides that since he's seen Hawk and Dove's future, there's actually one more person related to Hawk and Dove that he hasn't seen the future for. So he contacts with both of them at the same time and sees their kid's future. So their kid turns out to have the DNA of both Hawk and Dove. And one of their family friends, whose name is Bartier, he gets like the crap beaten out of him by Monarch, and he's dying. And before he dies, he passes on Hawk and Dove's like amulets that give them their powers, and says that like if she says the magic word, she'll become a superhero just like them, and that the key is unity. And then he dies, and then when he dies, his like little store that he lives in dies with him, and so she has to jump out of it just in time, which she succeeds in doing. She tries to figure out how like these little amulets work, because she doesn't know what the secret word to them is, but she gets called by her friend because like the daughter of Hawk and Dove is a nurse, like a surgeon, so she goes and stops somebody from dying, and Monarch is there watching her, and he reveals to her that the person's life that she saved was someone that was holding secret information, and they tried to kill themselves so that Monarch couldn't go after them. But she's just saved their life, so now Monarch will be able to get the information that he wanted. And then he tells his subordinates that she is a dangerous person and that they should keep an eye on her and put her on their list. So, Hawk and Dove's daughter, she doesn't know that Hawk is her dad. Now she does, but she didn't before. So she goes to her dad, who isn't her biological father, and tells him that, like, she's found out what her destiny is. And it's while she's talking to her dad that she figures out how to activate the power of the amulets. So she says the word unity and activates both of the amulets at the same time, and it transforms her into a new character called Unity, who is basically just a purple hawk and dove. It's both of them fused together. And after she transforms into Unity, they're attacked by the Peacemakers, and she fights them for a bit, but then turns herself in because she wants to kill Monarch, so it's easier for them to take her straight to him, which is exactly what they do. They take her to Monarch. She pretends that she wants to join his side, and Monarch agrees because of how powerful she is, because she's the most powerful person behind him. But, you know, she turns against him and fights him, and we don't get to see the ending of that fight, and Wave Rider comes to the conclusion that she very well may be the key to defeating Monarch in the future, but obviously his goal is to stop Monarch in the past, not the future, so he's going to keep searching until he finds the person that becomes Monarch, because it's not Hawk and Dove. And that's where the annual ends. This one was fine. It's just really fucking confusing. I had a real hard time explaining this one. I hope I explained it as well as possible. But yeah, really, really fucking confusing. But whatever, let's move on. So now we're going to be talking about Hawkworld Annual 2, written by John Ostrander with art by Gary Quapiz. And obviously I've had a bit of a sour history with John Ostrander when it comes to tie-ins and events. I'm fine with his regular series most of the time, but for some reason he's just not very good at writing tie-ins because he just doesn't commit enough, and like they all just end up being kind of boring. This one is better than most of his tie-ins, but it's probably still like maybe it's my least favorite Armageddon tie-in so far. So yeah, he kind of goes over everything that has happened in the last annuals, and then we get to Hawkman and Hawkwoman, specifically the Shaira and Katar Hole versions of Hawkman and Hawkwoman. They currently live in Chicago, where they protect it from supervillains. They're fighting a criminal known as Ricochet, who has the ability to like bounce around and ricochet off walls and shit. They eventually beat him and then head back to their apartment, where they decide to, you know, chill out. And when they get there, there's this character who is like, he's an ambassador, he's an ally of Katar and Shiara, and Wave Rider uses the opportunity to, like, he sees the ambassador and he decides to take on the form of the ambassador in order to talk to or to contact with Hawkman and Hawkwoman. So, you know, he becomes the ambassador and then contacts with Hawkman, and we get to see Katar's future. So, in Katar's future, he has retired from being Hawkman, and he's married to the councilwoman who is currently running for election, and he hates, like, he considers himself a liability to her in her campaign, and so their relationship is kind of on the rocks. And he's eventually convinced by Shiara to become Hawkman again, because she thinks that if he becomes Hawkman, not only will he be able to make a change in the world, which is what he wants to do, he wants to make a change that his wife isn't interested in doing, but also that, like, his wife might actually like the idea of him being Hawkman because it would be better for her campaign if she has a hero, you know, as a part of it. And so he comes out of retirement, he becomes Hawkman again, and his wife agrees with him that it's gonna help boost her campaign. And yeah, Cher and Katar become Hawkman and Hawkwoman again after all these years. Meanwhile, there's this woman whose name is Julie, and she sees the announcement of Hawkman coming back and she smashes her TV, and she's really pissed off because Hawkman killed her dad many years ago. So her dad is named George, and in Hawkworld comics, he possessed this robot from the future called Attila, and Hawkman killed him, and so she goes to this church where Attila is, like the robotic body of Attila, and she thinks her dad is still alive, but she doesn't know that he isn't. And so the Attila robot, like, sucks her soul into him, and she becomes the robot, and she decides that she wants to get revenge on Hawkman. Meanwhile, her husband is chasing after her because he's trying to stop her from giving in to... Because he's like, this is what your father wants. This isn't what you want, you know? This isn't what God wants. Because they're incredibly religious. So Hawkman and Hawkwoman are back to being superheroes. They're taking down criminals. Ricochet is revealed to be dead in the future because he just got old and his legs gave way because he's on drugs. So he's dead. So they managed to, save a lot of people. A lot of the criminals that they're fighting against end up dying. But they managed to assess the situation and get it under control. They head back to their apartment, but then hear a massive explosion, and it's because Attila is attacking the city, which Hawkman is confused by because he killed Attila, so he doesn't know how he's back. So they fight Attila, and they discover that Attila is actually the daughter of the original Attila. And so their goal is, because Attila wants to kill Hawkman, Attila won't hurt anyone or won't destroy the whole city until Hawkman is dead. So Hawkman's going to keep him busy while Shiera tries to defeat Attila. Eventually, Hawkman manages to convince the daughter to leave the body of Attila and go back to her own body, because they get through to her that it's not like what God would want. And so Katar manages to put his body into Attila and take control of the Attila body and send it out into space so that it will just explode in space and save everyone. But before he does that, he almost gets, like, mad with power, because when he becomes Attila, he's like, I could become, like, the monarch of this world because of how powerful I am. So it's kind of like, oh, is Hawkman gonna become monarch? But no, he doesn't give in to the desire, and he destroys the body of Attila and heads back, and that's it. That's where the annual ends. Wave Rider realizes that neither Hawkman or Hawkwoman become monarch. He leaves and heads off to find the next hero that he's going to connect with to see their future and see if they become monarch. So yeah, like I said, this one was fine. It wasn't bad. There was just a lot of stuff in it that I didn't care about, while there was some stuff in it that I enjoyed, which was like all of the Attila stuff was fun to read. The campaign stuff, not so much, because in the end it's not going to really matter, because this is an alternate future that is going to be retconned eventually. But yeah, it was fine. Probably the best of the tie-ins that he has done so far. Alright, so the next one we're going to be reading is Flash Annual 4, written by Mark Waid, with art by Craig Brassfield and Andrew Papoy. So, just like the other annuals, this one involves Wave Rider looking into Wally's future. There's like a annual Flash Day going on, and Wave Rider goes there and takes the look of a fan so that he can talk to Wally. And Wally gets distracted by this other character who is like a reporter. her name is what was her name again? Because she's only in this. Bonnie Blackmon. So she speaks to Wally, and while she's speaking to Wally, Wave Rider makes contact with him and gets to see Wally's future. So in Wally's future, he's no longer Wally West. He's a guy called Michael Edwards. He has a son, whose name is David, I'm pretty sure. And then his wife is Bonnie, but she goes by a different name. But I'll just refer to her as Bonnie. Yeah, his son's name is David. So yeah, he has a son called David. The reason why he's changed his name and like they've got a different life now and he stopped being the Flash is because when he was younger, he faced this villain called Diogenes, who was basically this guy who had the ability to receive people's memories by touching them and then be able to influence them. So he would like handshake them and influence their actions. So he got all of like Wally's enemies to fight him at the same time, and but then Wally was able to trace it back to Diogenes, and Diogenes was sent to prison because of Wally. But even while he was in prison, he was still getting revenge on Wally. So when he and Bonnie got married, Wally's mom was assassinated by Diogenes. And so that's when they decided to go into hiding and change their identities and stuff. Because Wally's a metahuman, his son David does have speed powers. But unlike Wally, his son didn't receive his aura. So he can run at super speed, but if he does, he can die. So David goes outside to play, and while he's outside playing, a little girl almost gets hit by a bus, and David tries to save her, but in doing so, really hurts himself because he used the super speed. So Wally sees this and dashes out to grab his son and take him off to a nearby hospital. So he drops his son off at the hospital, and meanwhile, Diogenes is still in prison, and his son Matthew goes to visit him, and Diogenes tells his son that he has a plan to give his son powers, and he calls on the help of Leonard Snart and gives him a list of all of Flash's rogues and tells Leonard Snart to contact everyone because he wants their help with his plan. So basically, his plan is to siphon Wally's powers and give them to his son. The way he's going to do that is he's going to hold Tina McGee and Jerry McGee hostage and force Jerry McGee to help him build a machine that will give his son Wally's powers. The way he's going to get a hold of Wally's powers is by enlisting all of Wally's rogues to attack random parts of the city, because he knows that Wally is going to use them to try to get to him. So Wally's going to go after all of the rogue members, fight them, get a little bit of information about where Diogenes is, and then eventually find Diogenes. But what Wally doesn't know is that each rogue's weapons are fitted with like a special device so that when they hit Wally and shoot him, they siphon some of his powers. So by the time he fights all of them, his powers will be completely siphoned, and then Matthew will get powers and be able to kill the Flash, because that's what Diogenes wants to do. Diogenes has a new villain working for him that has never appeared. There's a couple of new villains that appear in this. We got Paradox, who is this villain who has the ability to slow down and speed up time with a staff that has sand in it. He also seems to have two personalities that talk to one another. And another villain is Chillblaine, who is Gold Glider's new partner, because ever since Leonard Snart went straight, she started getting new partners that were usually younger than her. This is her sixth one. His name's Chillblaine. He appears in like 2 panels. So yeah, Wally decides to go and find Diogenes because Diogenes steals Wally's son, because that is his way to motivate Wally to come after him and to even start this whole thing. So he has the rogues kidnap his son, so he goes looking for his son and looking for Diogenes. Weather Wizard attacks a stadium, so Wally goes and beats him up and learns that Diogenes is most likely in the Keystone fusion, which is like an underwater fusion reactor that was built in Keystone City. So while he goes there and he finds Turtles minions like Stride and Slow and Steady and fights them and learns of another location. So he basically just gets sent on a wild goose chase. So he fights them, finds out about another location, heads there and fights the Rainbow Raider, who has used his powers to cause part of the city to go insane. So he fights the Rainbow Raider and then gets Rainbow Raider to turn everyone back to normal. And then he goes to an airfield where Chillblain and Golden Glider are causing a mess. So he goes and stops them. And then he finally ends up confronting Paradox, who is the final person that Wally needs to fight. And Paradox uses his powers to pretty much beat Wally. Like, he almost beats him, because he uses his powers to, like, he's going to slow down one half of Wally and speed up the other half, which would tear him apart and kill him. But Wally manages to break through Paradox's powers, because Paradox is, like, talking about what he's going to do. Wally uses that advantage to just knock Paradox off the side of the head. He's too busy professing to Wally what he's going to do. And then he starts, like, choking Paradox and, forces him to tell him where his son is. So Wally finally confronts Diogenes and his son Matthew, who is strapped to the machine. Wally's powers have been completely siphoned and are about to be passed on to Matthew. Wally tries to stop them from passing the powers onto Matthew, but he's too late. The powers get passed on and they destroy Matthew's body, and Matthew dies. And then his father, Diogenes, dies mourning over his son's body. Wally reveals that the reason why Matthew died is because his powers are fit for only his genetic makeup, and so they killed Matthew because he didn't have the same genetic makeup as Wally. And that's how we knew he was going to die. And so Wally loses his powers completely, but he recovers his son, and they all head home, and Wally gives his son his Flash ring, because David still has speed powers. So what I think the idea is that Wally is kind of setting him up to be the new Flash when he gets older. But yeah, Wally doesn't have powers anymore, and so he heads back home with Bonnie, and they just live an ordinary life as they watch over their son who has speed powers. And then this future is immediately retconned, because we return to the present where Flash realizes that he's been in a trance, and Bonnie is led away by another guy instead. And so it's assumed that this guy and Bonnie will end up together, and that, yeah, Wally and Bonnie don't actually end up together. So it's immediately retconned. And that's where the annual ends. Wave Rider himself doesn't really appear at all. Either that, or it's supposed to be assumed that Wave Rider... Well, we do see a panel of, like, Wave Rider kind of, like, disappearing. But, yeah, this guy isn't anyone. This guy that takes Bonnie away, like, maybe it's supposed to be Matthew, I don't know. But, yeah, they immediately retcon Bonnie and Wally ending up together. And that's it. That's the end of the annual. Alright, so next I'm going to be talking about L.E.G.I.O.N Annual 2, which is the best annual so far. It's so fucking good. I can't wait to talk about it. It's written by Alan Grant with art by Mike McCone and Jan Harps. So, obviously, Legion is a team that's led by Vril Dox. It's basically a new version of the Legion of Superheroes because they don't exist anymore, and it's basically kind of like a reboot of that, but like all the members aren't like some boy and shit anymore. They've got like different names, but they're still super people, and basically they're just all about doing justice across the galaxy. And one of their allies is Lobo, a reluctant ally of those, and so the story starts off with Lobo on a planet. He's beaten the crap out of a species of creatures, and basically he's putting them on trial, his own trial, because he deems them as like murderers. And so he's there with a character called Telepath, and he gets Telepath to go through these monsters' minds, and Telepath reveals that they have like all of the crimes that they've done. And then instead of killing them all right there, Lobo challenges them to a chance, like to a fight, so they have a chance to survive. And the fight is against him, so he wants all of them to fight him. And he just beats the crap out of all of them, and like kills a bunch of them. And then Wave Rider is watching in the distance, and is like, that man is a horrible tyrant already. It's pretty likely he could become Monarch, so I'm going to contact with him and see if he becomes Monarch. So he contacts with Lobo, his hand goes right through him, and Lobo actually notices Wave Rider is there, he sees them, and he's like, who the heck are you? He connects with Lobo, and we see Lobo's future, and Lobo's future is exactly the same as his present. He just continues being a tyrant, and so Wave Rider is like, there's no way he's going to become Monarch, because he's exactly the same in the future as he is right now. Like, that's literally all we see of his future. And Lobo tries to pick a fight with Wave Rider, but Wave Rider decides to leave, and Lobo's like, hey, get back here, you ball! Like, you nutface, you nutsack. And Wave Rider decides to leave to find the L.E.G.I.O.N, specifically Vril Dox, because he believes Vril Dox could be the one who becomes Monarch, because he is incredibly smart and cunning and stuff. So, you know, he decides to go to Legion. He's about to contact with Vril, but Vril Dox senses him and knows that he's there, and it's a trap for Wave Rider. This is why this is so fucking good. He presses a button, and Wave Rider gets caught in like a time trap that keeps him, like, he can't move. Vril Dox is basically just like, what are you doing here? You know, tell me what you're doing. If you don't tell me, I'll kill you. Alright? And so Wave Rider is like, I'm here to see if you're Monarch, because this tyrant called Monarch takes over the future, and I want to see if it's going to be you. So I want to go into your future and see if you become Monarch. And Vril Dox agrees, and he's like, if you try to pull anything, I'll kill you. So he allows Wave Rider to contact with him, and they both get to see Vril Dox's future. So in the future, the Legion have split in half. Half of the members are no longer members because Vril Dox has become a tyrant who is trying to take over the universe alongside Lady Quark. You remember Lady Quark from Crisis on Infinite Earth? She's a member of Legion, and she's alongside Vril Dox as his wife. Only a couple of members have remained with Legion, one of them being Cybo, who is a cyborg dude who's really powerful. The other members have pretty much all split off, including a character called Stealth. She's gone off hiding with Vril Dox's son, his future son, so that Vril Dox can't find his own son and make him evil. So a bunch of people get captured, like, because Vril Dox has taken over this planet, and he's taken over all the planets, and he captures a bunch of people on their home planet, and then experiments on them. He brainwashes them so that they all think that he's amazing, and then he has this horrible machine that fuses people together into horrific creatures, and basically he and Lady Quark plan on fusing each other together so they can become the ultimate life form. It's fucked up. So they become one with each other. It's really messed up. Lobo was the first person that Vril Dox just, like, got rid of. Like, he can't kill Lobo because Lobo is pretty much unkillable, so he just keeps him in a stasis pod forever. So yeah, the Legion decides that they need to reunite so that they can kill Vril Dox because he's becoming way too powerful, because he's trying to take over the galaxy, and that's not good for them. So yeah, they all have like a reunion. Some more members of the Legion that are still members of the Legion, they get fired by Vril Dox. Gav and Strata, I think is their names, get fired. So they reunite with all of the other members that are reuniting to fight Dox and take him down. They find Telepath. They find all the members, including Telepath, and they all reunite. And Telepath is told to use his powers to go into Vildox's mind, because he can do it from anywhere he wants. And so he looks into Vildox's mind and discovers that Vildox isn't in control of his own mind. There's these creatures called, what was the name of them again? The computer tyrants of Kolu, who they thought were all dead. They were killed by this thing called the Emerald Eye. It turns out they've infected Vildox's mind, and they're controlling him, and they're controlling Lady Quark as well. And that's why Vril has become super evil. So Cybo attacks their little meeting that they're currently doing and kills a bunch of members of the Legion right there and then. There's even a baby in the room. They're like, Cybo, stop shooting. Like, there's a baby in the room. Because one of the Strata has had a baby. So they obviously try to escape from Cybo and fight him. And Cybo kills a few more of them. And so there aren't very many members of the Legion left. Of Legion. So they decide that they need to head to Vildox and kill him, because they've lost too many members now and they just need to get rid of him once and for all. So they head to where Vildox and Lady Quark are. Meanwhile, Vildox and Lady Quark fuse together to become a horrific creature that shoots lasers out of its vagina hands. I'm not kidding around. It's got like it's got hands right where like a vagina would be, and it shoots lasers out of it. It's really weird. So when they get there, they free Lobo, because he's probably one of the only people that could help them actually kill Vildox. Because, like, you know, Lobo's super powerful. So they team up with him, and they find this mutated Vildox and Lady Quark. And also, Vildox, I forgot to mention, Vildox and Lady Quark have Wave Rider held captives 10 years in the future still. So he's still there, being held captive by Vildox and Lady Quark. So this Lady Dox, I guess I'll call them, fights the remaining members of the Legion. They try to destroy the machine that fused them together, but Vildox just kills them. Kills Strata and kills a bunch of other members. Yeah, kills Lydia and kills Phase, and then kills everyone else. And Vildox just, like, obliterates the entirety of the Legion, and then finds Wave Rider, and Wave Rider is like, it's your fault that you became like this. And Vildox is like, no, it's not my fault, or at least the Tyrants are saying it through to him. It's your fault. When you came to the future, you're the reason, like, showing us the future is what caused Vildox and Lady Quark to go after the Tyrants, which eventually led to them being affected by us and, creating the future that you've shown us. So by showing them the future, you created this future. And then he absorbs Wave Rider and then heads out into the universe to conquer it. And so that's how Vildox's future ends. It ends with him winning and becoming a tyrant and taking over the universe. But he's not Monarch. He's just another thing that takes over the universe. So there's two horrible things. You got Monarch and then you got Lady Dox. And so Wave Rider tries to appeal to the good in Vildox and is like, you don't want to become that thing in the future, do you? And Vildox has good in him and is like, yeah, I care about justice, so I don't want to become that thing, so I will change the future. I'm not going to become him. And hey, if you ever, like, in need of, like, once you're done with your quest, Wave Rider, if you ever want to go out for, like, any adventures and help people, we've always got an extra space on the team. So he invites Wave Rider to join the Legion, gives him an invitation, and Vildox and Wave Rider shake hands, and Wave Rider heads off to find the next hero that he's going to contact with to see if they become Monarch. And that's the end of the annual. This one was really good. I really loved it. It was the first one that involved Wave Rider still being there, like still being a big part of that future. It's pretty great. Seeing how, like, you know, Real Docs captures Wave Rider and then he's still captured 10 years in the future. And yeah, just the whole thing, like, it was just a really good story, even though I'm not reading Legion, and, you know, it was hard for me to, like, feel deeply about the characters. Like, I still felt it when the Legion members died, because you don't want them to die, you know? They're all good people, they're all innocent people, they all die, including I think the baby dies too, sadly. I'm pretty sure. I don't think you see it, but I'm pretty sure the baby died, which is fucking sad. But yeah, the next annual we're going to be talking about is the New Titans Annual. So we'll get to see the future of the Titans. Alright, so next we're going to be talking about the New Titans Annual 7, written by Marv Wolfman, with art by Tom Grimberg, Willy Blyberg, and Ian Arkin and Al Vey. So, in this annual, Wave Rider takes the form of a member of Wildebeest's cult. Wildebeest is a villain of the Teen Titans who basically took over. When Hive was destroyed, Wildebeest came about and took over and became one of the Titans' main adversaries. He sucks. So, yeah, Wave Rider becomes a Wildebeest lackey in order to contact with Nightwing, who has been captured by Wildebeest's gang, which, you know, if you want to find out how that happened, you got to read New Titans. And so we get to see the Titans' future. In the future, Nightwing is still Nightwing. He's got, like, a shield and shit now. He's got a different costume. And he's on a new team of Titans. And later on, we discover that there's actually multiple teams of Titans, each one led by an original member. So one of them is led by Nightwing, one of them was led by, one of them would have been led by Starfire and Beast Boy, etc. But as we know, the original members are all dead except for Nightwing, because they were all killed by Monarch back in 1991. But Nightwing refuses to believe that they're dead. So Nightwing is attacking a facility that is producing drugs for this guy called Lord Chaos, who is basically trying to take over the world by putting numbing drugs in people's food so that they, you know, become really stupid, and obey his will, so he can take over. So Nightwing's fighting these guys, and he gets a bit overwhelmed, but then a character called Redwing shows up. It was a member of his New Titans. She's basically just Hawkwoman, but with red wings. And she helps Nightwing. Nightwing kind of describes her as his Robin, and she kind of is, like, interested in becoming his Robin, you know? So they help each other fight against the drug makers. They manage to make it out of the facility together, but are attacked by the local police force. I thought that they're the Peacemakers, but they don't refer to them as the Peacemakers at all. I think these are supposed to be the Peacemakers making a cameo appearance. So they're gonna shoot Nightwing and Redwing because they want them to, give themselves up. But it turns out that Redwing had set off a bomb in the drugging facility. So they set it off and blow up the facility and manage to make a getaway while the cops stay behind to try and save the drugs because they care about the drugs, because I guess they're working under payment of Lord Chaos. We'll learn a bit more about Lord Chaos later. I won't explain who he is right now because that's a later reveal. So Nightwing and Redwing get away and they reunite with a character called Kilowatt, who is another member of these Titans. He's basically this electric dude that can possess electrical things. So he possesses a vehicle that allows them to go all the way back to the Batcave, which is the Titans' headquarters, or like Nightwing's Titans' headquarters. So they head there. The Batcave has been completely destroyed because Batman is dead. Because this annual takes place after the Batman annual. So in the year 2001, Batman is dead. So they reunite with other members of the Titans. We got Mirage. We got Nightshade. These are all characters that I have no idea who they are because I haven't gotten that far in Teen Titans. I know that eventually, characters like Mirage do get introduced, but I've never met them before yet. So they go back and they find those Titans members They try to convince Nightwing that his friends are dead, but he refuses. He thinks that Lord Chaos has them captured, and he wants to go to Lord Chaos's base so that he can confront him and find out where his friends are. So they decide to head off to one of Lord Chaos's bases in order to get information on him and figure out where he is. And then Tara shows up. Terra. She's a member of the Titans in the future. I don't know how she comes back to life. I guess I'll find out when I read Teen Titans. She probably, comes back to life in that. But she's a member and she shows up. She agrees to go with them and they all head off to a Lord Chaos base. They try to do it stealthily, but they kind of fail and they end up just going whole hog straight into the base anyway. Nightshade's actually like a vampire dude. Thought I'd mention that. He bites people's necks and sucks out their blood. Mirage has the ability to turn into anyone, and Terra, as you know, has the ability to control rocks and shit. So they enter this base and attack it, but they get overwhelmed and they have to get out. But before Nightwing leaves, he gets some data from them because Lord Chaos decides to just destroy the entire base because he doesn't care about killing his own men as long as he kills the Titans. So he puts the base on self-destruct, and Nightwing refuses to leave until he puts his bracelet into a machine to get a bunch of data, which he does. And then he manages to barely escape with the help of Tara. And they head back to their base, where their leader tells them that, basically tells Nightwing that, Lord Chaos has killed all the other members of their team, all the other teams, including Nightwing's friends. They were all killed by Wildebeest back in 1991. And Nightwing still refuses. Dick still refuses to believe him. And so they decide to head to Titan's Island to confront Lord Chaos once and for all, because he's taken over Titan's Island. Titan's Island used to be Titan's Tower, but now it's the main base of all the Titans teams, and Lord Chaos has taken over it. So they head to Titan's Island to confront Lord Chaos. He's there, and that's when we find out who Lord Chaos is. So Lord Chaos is the son of Donna Troy. Donna Troy was the only surviving member of the attack from Wildebeest, other than Nightwing. And so after that, she left for Greece and then had a son who was Lord Chaos. And because Lord Chaos was a Titan-born, or at least he believed himself so, he killed Donna. Because, Titans usually have to kill their parents. So he killed his own parents. And so he orders all of his men to kill the Titans after revealing his origin. And Nightwing's had enough of Lord Chaos, and so he just tells the Titans to kill everyone, because normally he doesn't kill, but he tells everyone to kill, because he's just had enough. So they all fight his, bad guys, and Lord Chaos sets Titan's Island to blow as well, and so Nightwing puts his bracelet into the base to kind of try and get the whereabouts of his friends, and so he puts the bracelet in a computer to get the information out of it, and he finds out that there's no information about his friends, but he still refuses to move on from the fact that the Titans clearly are dead. And so we're left with Nightwing considering what he's going to do next in his life, future Nightwing. And that's when Wave Rider loses contact with Nightwing and decides to head off and find the next person that he's going to contact with and see if that they are Monarch. And that's the end of the Titans Annual. So this one was fine. I feel like if you're not reading New Titans at the time, this one can be very confusing, especially because it does eventually tie into New Titans. I am reading Teen Titans, but I just haven't gotten this far. I haven't gotten to the point where the name is changed from Teen Titans to just Titans. I've got a little bit to go before I get there. I've got 6 years more worth of comics to get through before I get to there. But yeah, it was fine. Just a lot of characters I don't really care about, which was pretty much all of them, except for Nightwing. And Lord Chaos is okay of a villain. you know, I feel like this was his introduction, but, you know, whatever. He's just evil tyrant that's born from a Titan. Let's move on to the next annual. Move on from New Titans, move on from Marv Wolfman, and move on to our next annual. So the next one we're going to be talking about is the Action Comics Annual 3. It's written by Roger Stern with art by Tom Grummett and Rhodia Hazelwood Garson and Van Catter as inkers. It doesn't say their first name, so I don't know what their first names, unfortunately. So this issue basically, like, Superman is fighting parademons who are trying to resurrect Calabac so that they can fight off Darkseid because they don't want to live under Darkseid's rule anymore. But then Metron shows up and says that he's handling it and that Superman can stick to his own, and Superman hates the fact that Metron is treating him this way. Then Wave Rider shows up and decides that, like, he's going to contact with Superman because he wants to learn a little bit more about him, even though he has seen a possible future. He wants to see if he can learn more. So he contacts with Clark again, and we get to see an alternate future, because it turns out in this future, Clark retained the memory of the last future that he saw, so he went and stopped the nuclear bomb from going off in Metropolis. But in this timeline, Jonathan Kent was crushed by a tractor, and then after that, Clark and Lois got married, and Jonathan Kent's death would serve as pretty important later, because Pete Ross would run for president, and then would get injured when somebody attacks his campaign, and so Pete Ross ends up in the hospital, and so Clark runs for president, and he succeeds, and he becomes President Superman, and he starts making all these different decisions that, you know, if Jonathan was there, he would argue with Clark and tell him not to do it, but because he's not around, this is what happens. So Clark becomes president, but he's also Superman at the same time, and he's doing Superman things while running for president and while being president. And eventually, he comes up with the idea to a disarmament plan where he would disarm all of the nations, starting with America, and so that he can, like, end wars forever. Because if they don't have any weapons, then they can't fight. So he brings together all of the Justice League and tells him his plan, and Guy Gardner is against it, because he thinks that Superman is is a traitor and is trying to make America, you know, weak and not be able to defend themselves in war. So he tries to impeach Superman by beating him up, but Superman takes Guy's ring. Like, Guy's ring comes off of his hand and goes on to Superman. Like, Superman, like, orders it to come onto his hand. And then Guy tries to punch Superman without his ring and breaks his hands. And then, Superman's about to, like, kill Guy. And then Hal and John show up. And Guy's like, hey, like, can't you see? Superman's going crazy. We gotta stop him. You gotta let me finish him off. And John's like, nah, Guy, I'm just gonna, like, take you out into space because you're attacking the president. Because everyone's blinded to Superman's power as being the president. They're all following him blindly, except for Guy. And so Guy just gets taken out into space to be left in space as a prisoner. Hal gives Clark a power battery, so Clark in this timeline is probably going to become a Green Lantern. We don't get to see it happen, but Clark continues his plan of disarmament, and at the very end is kind of just like, Pa, like, is this what you would have wanted? So he kind of starts rethinking, because he knows that this is not what Jonathan Kent would have wanted. And so that's kind of where that future ends, is that, like, Clark has become president and he's continuing on with his plan. No one's going to stand against him. And Wave Rider loses contact with Superman, and then Clark heads off to save his dad from being crushed by the tractor because he doesn't like the future that ends up happening, because he obviously saw his president future. So he goes and saves his dad, and Wave Rider, after seeing that happen, is like, yeah, there's no way Superman is going to be against us. He's always going to be on our side, no matter what. But the real question is will he? Because there's another Superman Annual coming up. Not next, but there's one after the Detective Comics one. So are we going to see another alternate future for Superman? Probably. Alright, so the next one we're going to be talking about is Detective Comics Annual 4. Written by Louis Simonson, with art by Tom Grimberg. And I kind of question whether or not Louis Simonson wrote this at the exact same time that they wrote the other Batman one, because it's not connected at all, and it in fact just talks about another future for Batman. It doesn't do what the Superman one does, which kind of like has Superman retcon his other future. No, this one just has Batman live out a completely different life. And it's still terrible. He still has a terrible life. Like, it never ends good for Batman. So in this alternate future, Batman faces Ra's al Ghul, because Ra's al Ghul destroyed the manor, like the Wayne Manor, and was going to try and, like, destroy the world's population with a virus because he believed that people were destroying themselves and that they're never going to get better. So he wants to destroy everyone with a virus. So Batman goes and stops him once and for all by stopping Talia from... because he kills Ra's al Ghul, and then Talia comes along and tries to bring him back to life, but Batman manages to escape and destroy and like stole the experiment. So Ra's al Ghul ends up not surviving, and like she can't bring him back with a Lazarus pit, and so she blames Batman for killing her dad, and she decides that she needs to get revenge. As Bruce escapes from the base, he really badly hurts himself, breaks his back, breaks most of his limbs, shatters his legs, and so he's taken back to the Batcave in a near-death state and is hospitalized for a while. And so Tim Drake decides that Gotham needs Batman, and he becomes Batman for a while. Except not for very long, because one of the first things he does is he goes after some criminals, and then he gets ganged up on by the League of Assassins and gets shot and then dies. Because Talia thought that he was Bruce, and she was trying to kill Batman, and she didn't know it was Tim, and so she just straight up murders Tim's ass, and he fucking dies. And then Bruce finds out, there's like, oh my god, like, how could you let him go out as Batman? And Alfred's like, he was an adult, like, there's no way I could have said no, and, he was right about the city needing Batman. And so Bruce decides that he needs to get back out on the streets as Batman and find the ones responsible for killing Tim, because they don't know who killed him. So he works on, like, cyborg implants and shit and turns himself into a cyborg so that he can become Batman again. And then he heads out and starts questioning everyone in order to find out who killed Tim. So he questions some random mobsters who lead him to another mobster, and who lead him to Two-Face. He bends Two-Face's coin in half in order to get Two-Face to tell him who he needs to talk to. Two-Face tells him to talk to the Joker, and then the Joker gives Batman something that he calls a death trap, and when Batman opens it up, a little Joker pops out of it, and it tells him that he needs to go to a warehouse. So Batman heads off to the warehouse, where he finds the League of Assassins. Oh, he doesn't find the League of Assassins. He heads to a warehouse where he finds a guy that's roped up, and the guy tells him that, like, the people that killed Tim had, like ninja clothes on and shit. And so Batman comes to the conclusion that it has to have been the League of Assassins. He heads to their base because he thinks it might have been Ra's al Ghul, but then he discovers that it was Talia al Ghul, And she's like, it's because I was trying to kill you, darling. Like, killing the boy was an accident, but I'm actually trying to kill you. And so Bruce gets ganged up on by the League of Assassins, and he gets his ribs crushed by one of the members who has been powered up, crushes Batman's ribs, and so he's dying, and so Talia is like, I'm not going to let you die, though. I'm going to put you in the Lazarus pit and bring you back to life so that you can be immortal forever. And Bruce doesn't want her to. He just wants her to let him die. But she refuses, and she puts him into the Lazarus pit. And because he's got cyborg parts, it causes a reaction with the Lazarus pit and causes a massive explosion, killing Talia al Ghul and all of the League of Assassins. And that's how this future of Batman ends. It ends with Tim dying, it ends with Bruce dying, and it ends with Talia and all the League dying, and the only one left is Alfred. And we don't get to see what happens to Alfred, we just know that he's all alone now, and life is shit. And Wave Rider is just like, yes, Batman's life is shit in the future all the time, and he's doomed to die no matter what he does. And that's where it ends. So, yeah. Fun. Real fun. It wasn't bad. It was just, like, depressing. It's kind of hard to read an annual... Like, it's kind of hard to read something when it's just really sad and depressing and, you know, you're just watching all these characters. Like, seeing Tim just get shot and die was just rough. Especially because he wasn't even Batman for very long. He just puts on the costume, fights some guys, gets shot, dies. Alright. The Adventures of Superman. Annual 1. This one sucks. It's not good. It's written by Louis Simonson, who wrote the Batman one, and Brian Hitch. And, like, with art by Brian Hitch and James Sanders III, and I just get this feeling that Louis Sanderson just... He's like Brian Azzarello, where he just has to write, like... Louis Simonson is like Brian Azzarello, where he just has to write depressing shit. So, first of all, Louis, just like in the Batman one, Louis just completely disregards what happened in the other Superman ones, where, like, at the end of the last Superman Annual, Wave Rider came to the conclusion that Superman would never become Monarch. And DC Editorial were totally not trying to make sure that there was any continuity between these, because Louis Simonson is just like, will Superman become Monarch? Let's find out in this future. Like, there's no continuity between these Superman annuals, except, like, the first two had continuity, but this one is just like, oh yeah, like, I want to do my future for Superman, even though it doesn't make any sense anymore, since we've already confirmed twice that Superman will not become Monarch. But anyway, we're checking out his future now, and this is the worst one. This future is awful. So Clark and Lois get married in this future. Pa Kent is there this time. I don't know if this horrible future happens because Pa Kent is there. It's the only difference. They get married. They're gonna have a child. Like, she gets pregnant. And they're gonna have a kid. They're getting, like, a bed and stuff for it. And then Lois just fucking dies. The kid kills her. Because he's got superpowers, I guess. Just destroys her, like, insides. And she just fucking dies. Superman finds her dead body and is just like, "Arr!" And so he leaves Earth. Because Lois died. And when he leaves Earth, he comes across this alien race who try to kill him because they know that he's Superman, or they can sense he's really powerful. So you shoot a big missile at him to try and kill him. It really badly hurts him, and Clark's floating body in space is found by Maxima, who is a villain of Superman who tries to get him to fall in love with her. So basically, the rest of the annual is just like, Maxima finds Superman, and then she tries to get Superman to become hers, but he kind of, like, rebels against her, because, like, she's trying to basically destroy this alien empire and take over, and she wants Superman to help her, but Superman doesn't think that she should reduce herself and go that low, and kill these people, and that they should just go off and start their own life together. But yeah, Superman eventually ends up falling for Maxima, and then he heads back to Earth with a bunch of her technology, where he finds that Earth is being attacked by this evil alien overlord, and he and Maxima team up in order to stop this alien from destroying the Earth, and they succeed, and then they decide to spend the rest of their lives together, and it ends with Maxima being like, oh, I wonder how many children we're gonna have. And then that's it. You know, I read this one, and I just don't really want to talk about it that much, because it's not good. It's not a very good annual. It fucking sucks. Lois Lane dies. Why does Lois Lane die in, like... Why has she died in out of 2 or 3... Like, 2 out of 3 of these? First one, she got blown up by a nuclear bomb. This time, she got killed by her own baby. Also, the baby died too, because it was still inside her when she died. So the baby just died as well. You know. Superman never talks about it. He never talks to Maxima about the fact that he lost a kid and his wife. It's just not good. This is not a good one. Skip this one. It's completely skippable. It's not even necessary to read, because it just completely disregards the other 2 annuals, and it's just basically, this is just a what if. Of like, what if Superman's future was somehow worse than the other 2? His best one was the one where he became president and sent Guy Gardner into space to be isolated. That's the best future Superman gets in this event. Like, Jesus Christ. Alright, so the next we're going to be looking at is Justice League Europe. It's the final annual, written by Keith Giffen, and Gerard Jones, with art by a lot of different people. A lot of people that is... It's hard to name off because it's just their last name. So Carr, Elliott, Heisler, D'Angelo, Dooley, Helfer. But yeah, so the annual starts off with the Justice League Europe all hanging out together, and then they all decide that they're gonna leave, and they all teleport away. Captain Atom decides to leave for a while, and he's not gonna come back for a while. So, yeah, some of the Europe members head to their London embassy. And while they are there, Superman and Wave Rider shows up, because apparently Superman and Wave Rider have decided to team up now, and, you know, Superman has decided to help Wave Rider with his mission. I don't remember that happening at the end of the last Superman annual, but I guess that's what happened. I must have forgotten. So Wave Rider shows up, and he starts contacting different members of the group. He starts with Catherine. Now, I had to look up some of these members because I had no idea who these characters were, but, like, I still don't know who Catherine is. As far as I know, she's just a regular person that works with the Justice League. So Wave Rider contacts with Catherine, and we get to see her future. She's basically just the mother of the Justice League Europe in the future, where she just goes out and gets them their groceries and shit, and she's kind of miserable. And then, like, after she goes in and asks everyone what they want, she leaves the house, and then a weird a giant explosion happens that destroys the entire mansion with the JL inside it. And she's just like, oh shit, what was that? And then that's it. That's all of her future. These are all pretty short and very bizarre. And so, Wave Rider's just like, alright, let's move on to the next person. Contact with Rocket Red, and he contacts with Rocket Red, and in the future, Rocket Red ends up in Camelot. And King Arthur is so amazed by him popping out of nowhere, he thinks that he's magic. He offers Rocket Red to become a member of the Knights of the Round Table. And Rocket Red is just like, yeah, sure. And he joins the Knights, and he goes out on quests, and he fights a bunch of dragons and shit. And he kind of misses his family, but he also enjoys being a member of the group. And Merlin is really jealous, because he's like, I can do magic, you know? You know what? I'm gonna get my revenge on Rocket Red for showing me up. And he summons Etrigan the Demon, and then he sends Etrigan the Demon to go after Rocket Red and kill him in his sleep. And so Etrigan just goes after Rocket Red and kills him in his sleep. And then that's it. That's where that's where Rocket Red's future ends. He gets killed by Etrigan. Like I said, these are really weird. And so Wave Rider contacts with Power Girl next. She ends up in World War II in the future, where she meets General Glory and Irwin. Remember General Glory from Justice League International Annual? He's just he's a parody of Captain America, and Irwin is a parody of Bucky. And so Power Girl goes to help some people in World War II, and an explosion happens when General Glory goes after her, and Irwin gets crushed by a bunch of rocks, and then Power Girl becomes the new Irwin and joins General Glory as his new sidekick. And that's it. Like, that's Power Girl's future. So Metamorpho gets contacted next, and he ends up in an apocalyptic future where he fights a bunch of guys and then meets Jonah Hex, because in the 90s Jonah Hex was changed from being a cowboy to being like a Mad Max kind of character. And then he and Jonah Hex decide to go get some drinks because they both look ugly. And that's it. That's Metamorpho's future. It's just like, what is going on? Wave Rider says that he doesn't need to contact with Wally because he's already done that. He's like, I've already touched you in the past, Wally. And Wally's just like, what? You don't just touch people that you don't know. So Wave Rider, he gets really upset about it. Wave Rider contacts with Silver Sorceress, who is a character. She ends up in, I know nothing about her. She ends up in caveman times where a giant snake almost attacks her, or like a big dinosaur snake thing. But a caveman shows up and starts beating the crap out of it, and she watches as he beats the crap out of this snake thing, and then a female caveman comes up and is just like, in caveman speak, she's kind of just like, men, right? And Silver Shroud's just like, you said it, sister. And then that's it. That's the end of her future. And then, so, Wave Rider contacts, what the fuck was her name? I looked her up, but then I forgot who her name was. I'm just gonna go to my history and look up the page. Crimson Fox. So he contacts with Crimson Fox, and she ends up in Cowboy Times where she meets Batlash, who is a Cowboy DC villain. And he's just been cheating in poker, and when she shows up, out of the blue, she like teleports in. They all get shot at by the guys that he cheated, and so Batlash and Crimson Fox escape to go back to Batlash's lair, but they meet him there, and so Crimson Fox beats the crap out of them, and then that's it. That's the end of that's their future. Now, it sounds like I'm skipping a lot, but I'm really not. Like, that's what happens. You know, the only thing I'm skipping is the dialogue, but like, you know, that's exactly what happens in these futures. Wave Rider contacts with Blue Jay next, who is a guy that can grow really small and grow wings. He ends up in the future where the Legion of Superheroes are, and they are recruiting new members, and they think that he has teleporting powers, and they're like, oh wow, you'd be great on the Legion of Superheroes with your teleporting powers. And Blue Jay's just like, I don't have teleporting powers, I can just grow wings and grow really small. And the Legion of Superheroes are just like, oh, we already have somebody who has wings and can grow small. This guy's kind of useless. Yeah, we hope you are successful in your endeavors, but the Legion of Superheroes will not be needing you. And so Blue Jay's just like, what am I supposed to do now? And he gets recruited by the Legion of Substitute Heroes, and that's his future. He gets recruited by like the worser group of the Legion of Superheroes. They're just like, hey chum, you'd be great on our team since we're the rejects. So Wave Rider contacts with Elongated Man next, and Elongated Man ends up in like Victorian times where he meets H.G. Wells, and Sherlock Holmes hates Ralph Dibny because Ralph Dibny is a better detective than he is, and he took down Moriarty really fast. And then H.G. Wells is just like, hey Ralph, like, can I show you something I've I've invented something. And Ralph Dibny's like, of course, I'm a massive fan of War of the Worlds. And H.G. Wells goes and shows Elongated Man that he's built a time machine. And Elongated Man is just like, you need an assistant? Because I'd love to help you build this time machine. And that's where Elongated Man's future ends. And then Captain Atom shows up, and Wave Rider's like, you're here. I need to contact with you. You're the only person I haven't contacted with. And he goes to contact with Captain Atom. And they're definitely building something up with him. Like, maybe he's Monarch. Because he goes to contact with Captain Atom, and then the cat gets in the way, because the Justice League Europe have a pet cat. And this cat is actually a fake cat that is like a camera being used by one of their enemies called Mr. Biggers or something. And basically he's trying to find like a time machine because he thinks that there is one. And so we get to see the cat's future where the cat is still alive but barely. And some agents come in where the cat is, and the cat leads them to the time machine where they find it. But at this point in time, the cat has become so friendly with the Justice League Europe that it turns against its owners and like beats the crap out of them and jumps onto the time machine to keep them away from it. It's H.G. Wells' time machine, by the way. And so they shoot at the cat, which causes the time machine to explode, which is why the explosion happens in Catherine's future. That's what the explosion was. It was the time machine exploding, engulfing the entire mansion, and that's why all of the members of the Justice League got sent to different points of time in the future, which I really like the way that they connected that. It makes it a bit confusing when you're reading it, but then when they reveal this, it's like, oh, that's why things were so bonkers. And so Wave Rider's like, well, now I know that there's a time machine here, I can stop this future from happening. So, all of your futures that you just saw, they're not going to happen anymore because I'm going to stop the time machine from exploding. And then Captain Atom's like, hey, weren't you going to see my future? And Wave Rider's like, oh, right, I almost forgot. And he goes, contact, and he contacts with Captain Atom's body, and we don't get to see Captain Atom's future until Armageddon 2001 issue 2. So tune in next. We're doing Armageddon 2001 number 2, where we get to see Captain Atom's future and finally find out who Monarch is. So we make it to the final chapter, Armageddon 2001 issue 2, an issue that starts off really well and then falls kind of flat by the end because, spoiler alert, the ending to Armageddon 2001 and the person who Monarch was going to be was leaked back when this came out, and they changed who it was last minute. And so I'll talk about it a bit while we explain what goes on. So this issue was written by Dennis O'Neil, who did not write the first part. That was written by Archie Goodwin, so you can already tell that this one is, it's being written by a different person. So Danny O'Neil just came in and was like, we got to change it, because it got leaked, with art by Dan Jurgens again. So Wave Rider contacts with Captain Atom like he did at the end of Justice League Europe, and we get to see Captain Atom's future. Now, spoiler alert, or not even spoiler alert, I'm just going to say it, Captain Atom was originally supposed to be Monarch. And this flashback was, this flash forward was supposed to end very differently. It was supposed to end with him becoming Monarch, realizing that he's Monarch, meeting Monarch, and then becoming Monarch in the present. But everything changes. But we'll get to that a bit later. So, in this future, Captain Atom, Nathaniel, is a really old dude. Makes me wonder how old he is in the present, because in this one he's got in the future he's got it's only 10 years in the future, he's got a walking stick and he's got almost no hair, white hair. He looks a lot like Marv Wolfman does now. And he's just really old, and he stumbles upon his family dead. All of his children, all of his grandchildren have just been slaughtered. Turns out they got into the middle of a crossfire from a local gang, and they all died. And in the future, nobody really cares. And even though Nathaniel is a member of the feds, they don't care, and this policeman that he's talking to is actually friends with the gang. So he's like, yeah, your word doesn't mean anything around here. Get out of here, you old man. And so Nathaniel almost turns into Captain Atom out of rage, but he gets stopped. And when he's turning into Captain Atom, Wave Rider senses a distortion, like a disturbance in the time stream. But Nathaniel doesn't turn into Captain Atom. Instead, he heads off to find out what gang was responsible for his family dying. And he basically goes to ask if anything can be done about his family, if they can take action against the gang. And this guy's just like, nah, you can't. They got in the way, and so it's technically not against the law, because the laws are different now, and this gang was shooting in their area, and your children and grandchildren got in the way, and so it's their fault. Sorry. And so Nathaniel decides to go to the morgue so that he can at least retrieve the bodies of his children and grandchildren. And when he gets there, he finds out that there was no room at the morgue, and they just dumped the bodies of his children and grandchildren in a heap, in a landfill. What the fuck? And so Nathaniel's just like, what the fuck? You dumped my children's body and my grandchildren's bodies in a landfill? So he goes to the landfill, where he finds the bodies of his children just under tons of garbage. And he's so pissed that he's just had enough. He becomes Captain Atom, but upon becoming Captain Atom, he actually creates a distortion in the time stream, which Wave Rider senses. He becomes Captain Atom and destroys the entire landfill out of rage. And then he heads off and finds that cop that told him to fuck off earlier, and basically says, you tell me where your gang is, or I'll fucking kill you. And the cop's just like, okay, they're at the church. So Captain Atom goes to the church. He specifically says, the next blast spreads your guts all over the sidewalk. Where are the Huns? It's pretty epic. I really like this part of the issue. Just seeing Captain Atom be so, insane. So he heads to the church, and he's basically just like, if you don't turn yourselves in, you might not live. And they all try and shoot at him, stupidly. So Captain Atom is just like, well, you made your answer. And he blows up the entire church and kills everyone in the church, and then just goes insane and starts blasting buildings and destroying everything. But then he quickly comes to his senses and realizes what he's doing, and he can't believe the horror of what he has just done. And so he screams. He's just like, ah! And then he depowers and just crawls into a fetal position. And it turns out, back when he turned into Captain Atom and he ripped a hole through the space-time continuum, Monarch was in the time stream the whole time. Turns out he was following Wave Rider and was secretly in the time stream without Wave Rider knowing. Captain Atom, Nathaniel turning into Captain Atom in the future, allowed Monarch to escape from the time stream into the present. So Monarch escapes into the present and is basically just like, now I can enact my revenge and take over. And that's when they realize that Captain Atom is not Monarch, because at that point he stopped himself. He would have become Monarch. It's assumed that the Monarch that Hank Hall fought in the future was Captain Atom, but now that future no longer exists. And so Wave Rider is basically just like, the reason why Captain Atom isn't the Monarch anymore, but the Monarch still exists, is because evidently I've created the Monarch by accident. By looking in people's futures, one of those futures, because when I looked into Superman's future, I affected his present and created another future. So by looking into everyone's future, I created the Monarch, but I don't know whose future I tampered with that now created this new Monarch. It's really confusing. So they've got to come up with a way to stop Monarch, because Monarch's obviously exists in the present now, so he's going to try and kill everyone. And it's going to happen earlier than originally. Originally it happens in 2001, now it's going to happen in 1991. So Dove is with her boyfriend, and then Monarch shows up and is just like, hello, Dawn, kills her boyfriend, and then kidnaps Dawn and takes her away. And, like, puts her in, like, a catatonic state, and then takes her to this, like, other realm, and puts her in there, and just like, you stay here, I gotta go get somebody else who's really important. And so, you know, he then goes and finds Hank Hall. And Hank Hall turns into Hawk. And just because Monarch knows that he's Hawk. And he's like, oh, he knows who I am? Well, I guess I'm going to have to beat the crap out of him. And he beats up Monarch. And then Monarch is like, yes, hit me again. And Hawk goes to hit him again. And Monarch teleports into the same place that he has Dove. Neither of them can move. He basically says that the reason why they're there is because he's grabbing all the people who are important to him existing. And so we're getting a little bit of a hint as, like, you can kind of see where this is going. Monarch heads off on his own and steals a bunch of random shit. Turns out he's building a, like, neutron bomb that he's going to use to destroy all of the superheroes all at once, even Superman. Captain Atom wants to stop Monarch himself, but the heroes are all like, nah, if you go after him, like, if he senses that we're around, he's just going to set off the bomb anyway, so we might as well all go fight him. And Captain Atom is just like, fine with me, you go deal with him yourself, I'll just go do my own thing. Like, screw him, he's not going to miss me anyway. And so Captain Atom flies off to do his own thing and leaves the heroes to all go fight Monarch themselves. Monarch reveals that the death of Dove is required in order for him to come into existence. So he kills Dawn, which pisses off Hawk enough to try and kill Monarch. So he starts beating the crap out of Monarch and takes off his helmet and then sees that Monarch is Hank Hall. Monarch was Hawk. Monarch is Hawk. That is the big twist. It's Hawk. A last minute change because, yeah, it was spoiled that Captain Atom was Monarch, and so they changed it to being Hawk. And so Hawk killing the future Monarch creates the present Monarch, which within itself is just a, like, I feel like that's a bit of a, like, there's got to be like a loop, like there's got to, like, kind of break reality, right? Like, there's no way that makes sense. Because if Monarch dies in the present, how would he even exist in the future to go back and die in the present and create himself? You know, like, whatever. They definitely weren't thinking this through when it was a last minute change. So, of course, after killing Monarch and Dove being dead, Hank Hall has gone insane, and he's basically just like, I gotta create order in the world. How am I gonna create order? By becoming Monarch. And all the superheroes are probably going to try and get in my way, so I guess I'll destroy them all. And that's just when he decides to become Monarch. It's so stupid. Like, Hawk is just like, yeah, I'm insane now, and I'm Monarch now, cool. Like, wouldn't you think that, like, the death of Dove would possibly allow Hawk to decide not to become Monarch, because he sees what he ends up doing? Like, he doesn't want to become the guy that kills Dove, you know? So the heroes all team up to stop Monarch from blowing up the neutron bomb. Monarch shows up and they all have a big fight. The neutron bomb is attached to Star Labs. They all fight Monarch, and Superman smashes his mask, and that's when everyone discovers that he's Hawk. And, like, even Monarch is just like, can't say it has, like, he's just like, I was Hank Hall. I am Monarch. But you're pretty surprised by this turn of events, huh? Like, he's literally looking at the reader and being like, you're surprised by this, right? Like, you're definitely surprised, right? Because, like, we changed, because you thought you knew who it was, but then we changed it because of the leaks. So you're surprised, right? It's Hawk. Who would have thought? So he's about to set off the bomb, and then Captain Atom shows up and is like, no, I'll stop you because I'm the only one powerful enough to do so. So Captain Atom fights Monarch, and everyone else fights Monarch alongside Captain Atom. But then Monarch sets off the bomb and, like, starts destroying all the superheroes. But Captain Atom is immune to Monarch's energy, and so he uses his powers to negate Monarch's energy and envelop them both in a giant explosion which destroys the bomb and Star Labs and saves all the heroes from being destroyed. But Captain Atom had to sacrifice himself to do so, so it's assumed that he's died. Star Labs has collapsed, and so there are people trapped under it, and so all the heroes are like, we gotta go through the rubble and see if there's anyone trapped. And Wave Rider finds a young boy, who is Matthew Ryder. Because I think I don't think I ever mentioned it, because it was never super important, but I guess it is now. Matthew Ryder, one of the things that was pushing him to eventually stop Monarch is he had a memory of a superhero saving him during the day that Monarch killed everyone. And it turns out that that superhero was himself. Matt Ryder saved himself when he was Wave Rider. He's like, so that's why this memory is going to haunt me forever. Like, I finally know the thing that is going to haunt me for 40 years. And so, because he's like 8 years old at this point. And then we find that Captain Atom is on another planet that he's been teleported to thanks to his powers. And he realizes, he sees Monarch's glove on the ground, and he realizes that Monarch is stuck on this planet as well. And he's on a planet with dinosaurs. And then it ends. No kidding, that's how it ends. It ends with, like, Captain Atom stuck on a planet, and there's a dinosaur. And if you want to know how, like, what happens next, you're gonna have to read Armageddon, the Alien Agenda, which is a sequel to Armageddon. But I'm not going to read it because I was doing Armageddon. I'm not doing the sequel shit. Like, this is just Armageddon. And that was Armageddon. I did it. It's finished. I think there was, like, another issue of, like, Superman after this, but all that happens in it is that it's them just cleaning up after Monarch blew up the building, and that's it. Nothing else important happens in it, like, to the event. Armageddon. Started off real strong. Issue 2 started off real strong too, and then just kind of fell flat on its face with the sudden change in identity for Monarch, and the ending is very anticlimactic, and it just ends, you know, and it's not very satisfying. Hawk's reveal as Monarch is rushed and doesn't really make much sense. It's clear they only picked him because they didn't care about Hawk, and they were like, if there's a character that we can get rid of, like, if there's a series we can cancel right now, it's Hawk and Dove, because nobody's reading it. Yeah, some of the annuals were really good. I really enjoyed the Justice League ones. The Legion one I really enjoyed. I heard some people didn't enjoy that one. I enjoyed it. And then there were some real bad ones, like that Adventures of Superman one with Maxima, but the one where he became president and the one where he fights Batman, like, both of those are good because they weren't depressing and they weren't just, Superman in the future becomes dark and gloomy. But yeah, that's it for Armageddon, and that's it for this episode of the podcast. As you can probably tell, I'm just a little bit like there's not really a lot I can say. You know, I'm kind of lost for words because that's just what this event does to you when you read it. When you finish it, you're just like, alright, like, that's as much as I can talk about it. But yeah, if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, then please give it a rating and share it around, and I feel like we're leaving on a high because the next episode is definitely going to be a low, because next week we're going to start reading War of the Gods. Wonder Woman, War of the Gods, known as one of the worst DC events of all time. Wonder Woman has a losing streak when it comes to events that revolve around her. It's really sad. But it takes place next in the timeline, so I have to do it next. Or at least I want to. You know, I chose to do this. I'm not being forced to. No, I'll see. I'll have some fun with it. It'll probably, you know, I feel like I'm pretty good at, like, reading a bad comic and not becoming depressed and letting it just dictate my opinion. I feel like I can have some fun with it. But yeah, so I hope you have a good day, and I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. And I'll see you next Sunday for Wonder Woman War of the Gods. Let's hope it's not too bad. Maybe people are overreacting. See you then.